funding to be able to do the programs that you have within your nonprofit. So for her, her shelters were a nonprofit, and she needed funding to help run the programs, pay her staff, and all of that. So that's why she was before the Senate, and they had funded her shelter or shelters for 3 years already, and the time was up that she had to. Yes, so the 3-year period was up, so she had to come back and advocate to the senators because they're the ones that provided her the funding. So she had to come back again and advocate for more funding for another 3 years. And that's, as Vicki was saying, she shared stats and real life stories to help them understand the importance of how the shelter or the after program is working and how there is a need and it's worth continuing the funding. And that actually happens in real life. I think I mentioned it last week. The Violence Against Women Act needs to be recertified or refunding. So please, call your congressperson and ask for it to continue, because that act actually helps women dealing with disabilities. I just wanted to add that for the advocacy part. Okay, go ahead, Ms. B.
Absolutely. I was going to say that she's actually a social worker, which means AKA a change agent. Over the years, social workers have been change agents in the community. Actually, they were responsible for a lot of different programs that have been put into the community and a lot of different, even policies that passed. That's another show.
Yes.
We'll discuss that one day, or maybe we can talk about it and kind of talk about it while we're talking about the book. But I am a social worker major, but incomplete. Let's say incomplete social worker major. I started my master's with
in progress.
Okay. And we had studied different women or people, because social workers are men as well. But back in the day, they were talking about different women in history or different social workers in history who made a difference. And a lot of things that are going on in the community, we think, all of a sudden the government just wants to do something for us. No, a lot of it has to do with social workers. So anyway, Mary also was considered a change agent. But the other thing I want to say is that other part was she was preparing herself when she was reviewing the chart. She was preparing herself to talk with the client, with the lady, with the girl that was coming in, that she saw herself in the client. She was preparing herself, and the way she prepared herself is she reflected on her own life. And she even asked for, because of her relationship with God, she even asked God to help her, with it, which I can relate to that. Because I know when there's times that I come in contact with people that I'm in a situation where I need to help them, but more so with words, I usually ask for help, because I don't want to do anything in my own strength, because I don't want to mess it up. So I can kind of relate to her doing that. But moving on into the story after she reflected and all that, she ended up coming in contact with the young lady. Prior to her coming in contact with her, the young lady had to go through an assessment. I'm in chapter 2, I think, or almost in chapter 2. But she had to go through an assessment process, the girl that was coming into the shelter. Well, in her process of doing that, she went through some battles in her own mind. And that part, it showed mental health issues, where she had been through so much in the community, like in her life, that she was starting to have visible mental health issues, where she was hearing voices, and the voices was commanding voices, because there's audible voices where you just hearing things, hearing voices, hearing words, hearing sounds, but then there's another thing when they're telling you to do something. And so in her case, it was telling her to do something. It was like, you need to get out of here and go get high. You know you can go get some more drugs, and things like that. So she was having a battle in her mind, and then she had children with her. DJ Dika, before I go on, did you want to add to any of that yet? Because I'm feeling you pulling on me.
Yes, I just wanted to speak on that part when you're going through something such as domestic violence and then trying to decide, how can I put this? Sometimes, I'll say sometimes, because I learned in school, we both learned in school, you don't say all, say some. Sometimes people that are maybe going through domestic violence, they're torn. Sometimes they may want to stay because they feel like the person that they're with it could be a man or a woman, the person that they're with, that they could change them, or they'll do better, or they'll stop, or it'll only be one time. And then it's the other side where you want to leave, but you're not able to leave. So I do believe that's what she was going through. She was torn, and then I don't want to go to this shelter. I just want to go get my.
She was also at a point where she was she felt like that was the best she was gonna get.
Yes, and then in the midst of her going through her own addiction, on top of going through domestic violence with her father's children. Because I don't know I know that it was their daddy because the little girl said it. Yeah. I just don't know if they were married. But anyway, that whole dynamic, you're already going through your own trials of drugs. She's going through her own trials with drugs and domestic violence, and then she has to be a mother on top of it. And then she's feeling bad because she's putting her children through all of this, and she just felt, my children will be a whole lot, even though she's trying to figure it out, she's thinking about her children and how her children deserve more. So there we go.
And
I just want to add that.
Yeah, what she was expressing was she felt like they would be better and safe there, and she could go back out there because she wasn't ready to she didn't reach her bottom. She wasn't sick and tired of being sick and tired, so she was ready to go get high. That was her relief, because usually people that are on drugs, they're covering up something. They're medicating something. They numbing something. They trying to numb it anyway. So she needed a fix, and so her some people say it's alter ego, whatever the case may be. I feel like it was voices because she was on drugs. So you can't go into a psychotic mindset or behavior mentally because of the fact that the drugs, because you've been smoking so much drugs and you're not taking care of yourself. So,
can I add one more thing? I forgot.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing.
Mm-hmm.
That she was torn. I just thank God that even though she was torn, trying to decide, should I leave him? Should I go get my fix? Should I come to the shelter? The fact that her coming to a shelter was even part of the equation. Even though she was wrestling with it, she was inside the building. She looked it up. Didn't nobody force her to go in no phone book and look it up and go to no shelter.
Well, DJ, because she was actually looking for safety because apparently he was putting hands on her. So
right.
Sometimes you get a little fire put up under you to go and get some help. Like you be thinking, this ain't nothing. I'm just hitting the pipe or whatever the case may be. And then when you start feeling some real pain, then you be like, this don't feel good no more. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, she was going through that as well.
He was physically abusing her. That's why she left, because she went to somebody else's house before she came there. So she didn't come there because one day she was like, I'm just so tired of this, drugs or whatever. No, she came there because he was putting hands on her.
And then her friend's house wasn't no better. Yeah, and her friend's house wasn't no better because they were doing drugs. And then one more thing, the kids. Domestic violence as a whole, whether you know it or not or realize it or not, sometimes we feel like baby, well, they don't know, they don't hear, or they don't know what's going on. Yes, it affects the children. Example, in the story, her daughters, while she was filling out paper waiting for her appointment, they had a child care or baby, whatever was in the facility where she could have her kids go play. And there was a conversation, before she went to go into her appointment to make sure that the kids knew that they were safe. And the little girl even asked, is Daddy here or something like that? And she let her know that they were safe and her daddy wasn't here. And then the little girl even was like talking to the doll, okay, we're safe, So I'm just using that as an example to let you know that it does affect the children. Maybe you don't think they hear you, maybe you don't think they see, but children do peep out of doors and they can hear you. You might not see them. They're good at hiding, but they see and hear everything. Go ahead.
Well, I'm pretty sure in that situation they probably saw everything because they were straight out drug addicts. And once they get, as far as they were into it, they probably was getting high in the same with the kids. And one thing that happens with the children is that they torn because that was their father, and they did love him. They loved him just like they loved their mother. And so, when they see him acting kind, then they're like, oh, that's my daddy. Then when he's acting mean, they're like, oh, I'm scared of him. You know what I'm saying? So they're playing. So their emotions are going back and forth. And that's something that, people that are in those type of situations should really take into consideration, that you're playing with your children's emotions, not just your own. And especially when they're young, but even as they're growing, because you're molding them into what type of person that they should allow in their life. That it's okay because my mama did it or my daddy did it, And so it was just really good how Karen Kingsbury wrote that part in there where the lady actually went to the shelter when her children were young. And even though she had been abused physically as a excuse to get her there, it don't even matter. She was there. And she wanted to leave. She actually was almost out the door when the counselor came in. She had her hand on the door, getting ready to run out. And
her staff, the staff was able to catch her.
I think she might have left her kids, because I think later on in that chapter it talks about that, if it's not the next one, where it talks about how when she would go see her mom, the kid's grandmother, and how, she would leave them there, and the mom would be concerned about, if she's going to change and all that kind of stuff. So getting back to part about where she was going through assessment. So it's always nice when you have someone that works in the field of human services and they really care, because there's a lot of people that work in that field that are burnt out. They're only doing it for $1 or a coin or whatever the case may be for the money, and they don't care a red cent about the client. Well, the way the author wrote the story, the counselor that came in contact with this client or this woman, she had empathy for her. And she was actually, we call it discernment, but she was sensitive to her as well. Like she knew how to build a rapport with her in a short period of time to convince her to not leave, to get her to look at the bright side, to redirect her thoughts. Like she was experienced in dealing with those kind of cases. And so the girl was already made up. She was going to leave. And then the girl said a few words to her and convinced her to stay, even though it was reluctant, but it worked. She stayed. You know what I'm saying? So that was really, I love that scene, that part where she was in there, where the staff, because that's not the case sometimes. They be like, we're gone. We can't help if you don't want help. You know what I mean? So it's like she didn't do that. She really took the time out. And I mean, that's what they do. The shelters were for battered women. So it wasn't the first one. It wasn't her first merry-go-round. You know what I mean? It was like she do this all day long, and that was her job.
Yeah.
But she still had to be for her.
Yes. I just wanted to make that comment about the staff, the receptionist. Like Vicky said, she had discernment, and they're dealing with women or men all the time going through this. And she didn't make a big deal out of it. She just asked her, was she leaving? And then, when the character, Emma, I do believe is her name, said, she was going outside or something, she went outside with her. The staff went outside with her. and let her have her little moment. But I